I really have to 3D print that award and maybe stick it to the hood of my car. AI is great for augmenting people, for helping people, more than it is than replacing people.
I think you're writing a letter. I almost asked a really stupid question. I was almost about to say, what year did Windows 95 come out?
It always has time for you. It'll always listen. Hi, I'm David Packman. I'm a robot nerd. I am the co-founder of Packabby Robotics, and I do a bunch of other stuff on the side as well. Worked with AI for a few years, and Jim and I, know each other from way back when we did a video about one of the first desktop AI assistants that I made, which was Clippy.
So David, really excited to have you on the show. And as you were actually noting earlier whilst we were chatting, we recorded a show, which I'll put a link to the show notes to this, showing off your Clippy robot. And we published that on Pi Day 2 years ago. And we're actually recording this episode on Pi Day. So kind of like happy anniversary to the Clippy video we released. And kind of a cool note for the audience is we actually won an award for that show. We won a Telly Award. So for those of us who are watching this on YouTube, this is the Telly Award. For those who are listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or podcast platform of your choice, I'm holding up an award. Kind of looks a bit like a Rolls-Royce Spirit of Ecstasy, kind of sweeping back arms. But it's a Telly Award, Silver Award for Build a 3D printed Clippy powered by ChatGPT. So that was a show we recorded at the Microsoft Reactor a couple of years ago. I'll make sure there's a link to it. But this was kind of one of the first AI-powered robots, David, that you built. So do you want to kind of talk about why you built a Clippy robot?
So thinking back to the old days, and I really have to 3D print that award and maybe stick it to the hood of my car. When GPT started gaining a lot of prominence, and that was like, February of 2022, 23, something like that. There's a lot of talk about, hey, AI is going to be able to do your job, and going to be replacing people and doing things like that. But a lot of people didn't really understand the limitations of AI at the time, and really sort of didn't really think things through that AI is great for augmenting people, for helping people, for being able to enable you to do things more efficiently and more effectively, more than it is than replacing people. And that's true even today, even with all the advances. I see a lot of talk about, hey, we don't need developers anymore because AI can create code. The thing is that it's great at creating code that already exists, because that's where it gains its knowledge, is from all the examples out there all over the place of, my code does this. So when you ask AI to generate code that does this, if it's out there, it's really good at that. But the thing I've noticed with working with AI and generating code is that if it doesn't exist, especially if you're doing something really novel, like I do with robots, it's really lousy at it. It's not creative in what it thinks about. So it really relies on us to sort of guide it down that path of what code we need, and break it down into the individual functions that we need to happen. But when you try to put all that together into something cohesive that really does something, you still need that human element. So what I really wanted to do back then was sort of highlight that, hey, AI could be a great companion. It could be your co-pilot, which it wasn't called back then. And also what I wanted to do with that, and the reason why we put it open source and, threw all the code out there, the instructions on how to build the Clippy and everything else, is to, really reach out and show people, how easy it is to create something with AI, to, code a companion like that, and just to have fun with it as well. And, we put out there's still people that reach out to me. Just the other day, somebody was asking a question about the model and everything else because they couldn't find one of the parts anymore. So, I think it showcased what that sort of element that I wanted to showcase at the time. And, it's still out there.
Because the Clippy thing was great. Because I think, so I guess for anyone young who's listening to this, Clippy was kind of the first AI assistant back in the day before AI was really capable enough to do this. And it was this little paperclip that would pop up in Microsoft Word and do things like, it looks like you're writing a letter. How can I help? And it got absolutely mocked mercilessly because it wasn't very good. So you'd be doing anything else that's not a letter, and it will pop up and go, I think you're writing a letter. And so they eventually killed it. But it's kind of got this nostalgia for some of us who remember it as this kind of novelty idea that didn't really pay off. But now we're in the place in AI where it would work now. Clippy would work, but obviously they wouldn't bring it back because of the the mocking that we do towards it. But what you did is you basically 3D printed a Clippy. Don't know how much we can see. So for those who are listening, this is it. It's a 3D printed Clippy. So it is a paperclip, big eyeballs with a big speech bubble, because back then it wasn't done using speech, it was just done using text, in a very nice kind of two-tone 3D printed case with a screen. And you can interact with this with your voice. So it's kind of trying to recreate that idea of an assistant that was based off what Microsoft had, 20 years ago? Was the original Clippy something like 20 years ago?
Mm-hmm. Something like that. It was back in Windows XP 95? Yeah, it's a long time ago.
I almost asked a really stupid question. I was almost about to say, what year did Windows 95 came out? 1995, obviously. So it's kind of late 90s technology, really, that at the time, but which wasn't capable enough now. But I guess what you showed with that Clippy thing is ChatGPT is kind of capable enough that you can have a conversation.
Yeah, it was. I'd want to venture to say it was one of the first sort of speech-enabled AI desktop assistants. But it was really, just something that I threw together. It took like maybe 2 weeks to completely do it from scratch, including come up with the code to do it all and everything else. So, at the time it wasn't very full featured. I sort of tweaked it and gave it some more capabilities every now and then, I replaced it was built with a Raspberry Pi, so Pi Day, that sort of made sense and everything else. I replaced it with a larger SBC that had a Mali GPU so that it could actually run a small LLM locally.
Nice.
So it still needed internet connectivity because, yes, I could run a large language model on it. But then when you start talking about speech recognition and the requirements for that, then I would have had to try to slap a separate board just to do that on it because, SBCs don't have a lot of horsepower, and that does require a good bit of processing power. But, at least the LLM was local and, showed that we can actually do something, run something locally on an SBC, a small little single board computer.
So that's kind of an interesting kind of progression, because the first version on the Raspberry Pi, everything was cloud powered, wasn't it? So when you'd speak to it, it would use like an Azure speech service to convert that to text. And then that text would go to the LLM. And then the response would come back as text. And then you use an Azure speech service to convert that text back to speech.
Exactly.
So literally the hardware on it didn't need to be powerful at all. It's just microphone, some kind of processor that's making internet calls, and a speaker. And that's kind of it. So Raspberry Pi was probably even way overpowered for the time, for what you had there.
Yes and no. For Clippy, definitely, because all we were doing was speech and doing that sort of speech to text, text to speech, and then toss that over to the LLM. With what I've been working on lately, this little guy here in Mini Moe, it does a lot more than that. There's also multimodal AI, so it can actually see what's going on in the world around it and then sort of interpret that and describe it. So, for example, I could take it on walks with me, and if I see a plant that I don't recognize, I can say, "Hey, Mini Moe, what is this?" And usually it'll be able to tell me what it is, at least generally, if not specifically. But it's also useful for things like when I forget my glasses and go shopping for dog food, I can say, hey, what's the price on this? Or what are the ingredients? What do you know about the company that makes this? And that's pretty darn useful for me. But it also does fun things too. It also does image editing and things like that. So when you start talking about that, that's a lot of programmatic stuff in addition to the generative AI and diffusion and things like that. So, it's even less powerful than Clippy was. It's using a Pi Zero, but it's still plenty capable to merge that programmatic thing that you need to do in order to get all that functionality and leverage the cloud for AI and speech services and multimodal and doing the stable diffusion and things like that.
Okay, there is a lot to unpack there because you've literally just dropped on hey, this little robot, here's a list of 100 things it can do. And that is mind blowing. Sorry, this is why I was so excited to get you on the show because your robots are so cool. So this Mini Moe, can you just hold it up again? And for those who are listening to this rather than watching it, it's like a small red plastic robot style thing. It looks a bit like a chunky child's toy. And it's got a rectangular screen for a face with like just a little outline smile, 3 little arcs to make a nice little smile. And it's a very cute, very small looking toy. It looks like there's a camera and a speaker in there. And you're telling me that this you can take it on a walk. You can ask it to take a picture of a plant. It will identify that. You can take it to a store. You can ask it to read things on a bag of dog food, and it can tell you things about the price or what's in it. It's got that level of intelligence, that kind of multimodal capabilities built into it. And then you're saying it can generate images and do all those other kind of things. It's like a cute little assistant. I mean, I'm a Star Wars fan. For anyone who's not watching this, who are just listening to it, behind me right now, I have a whole load of Star Wars Lego. In fact, I'm even wearing a Star Wars t-shirt right now. And this feels like the kind of small robots you would get in Star Wars that can help and assist. And you've got that, and you're just literally holding it in your hand. It's small. It's literally, you're holding it in 3 fingers and a thumb, if that, 2 fingers and a thumb. Sits the palm of your hand, and it's got all this power. Right, you've got to dive into this. How does this work? Explain the whole thing, please, because this is very cool.
So, I mean, this sort of, you sort of progress from things. That's how technology does. You sort of miniaturize things, right? You start with a big bulky radio, and you get down to, coming out with like Walkman. If people are old enough to remember what a Walkman is, and then iPods, and then it's just all on your phone anyway, so it really doesn't matter. It was sort of the same thing with the robots. Started with Clippy as a desktop assistant. It has to be plugged in. It wouldn't be it'd be awkward to carry around a lot, even though it's still fairly lightweight. And it sort of progressed from that to making this little guy here, which is, albeit smaller, a little bit easier to carry, but has a lot more functionality because you could fit more sensors and you could fit more components into it that you can then integrate with AI services and boost that functionality so that you can have like vision AI, and you can have multilingual capabilities, so it can actually translate things for you. You can add in that sort of image editing, image creation capabilities. So I mean, there's little fun functionalities in it, like I could tell it to turn me into a cartoon, and it'll do that. It'll take an image of me and then send it off for image-to-image generation and return an image that looks more like a cartoon or things like that. So it's all a matter of how many sensors and does the AI have the capability to take input from them or interact with them and get the information it needs to do an action on it, and then figure out, hey, is there something fun we can do with that? So, we went that route, and that's where Clippy became something that was just speech to text, text to speech, to something that's more multimodal, like that other robot. And then it was more of a fact of, okay, well, this is fun, but it's still a little bulky to carry around. What would be really cool is if you could fit it in the palm of your hand, and it still have those sort of anthropomorphic characteristics that entice interaction. And I say this because, a lot of people ask me when I sort of take this out into AI events and things like that and sort of show it off, and they're like, well, why didn't you just make an app? Okay. I mean, that's a fair question, but there's a lot of studies out there that show that people develop bonds with and interact more easily with things that are anthropomorphic, things that have a physical body and, can demonstrate what it's doing if not thinking. So the face will change if it's talking, it'll change if it's thinking, it's changed if it sleeps, and things like that, so people can sort of identify what's going on. And it moves and things like that. So and the body has arms and legs, and so that sort of engenders more of a connection, a social connection with people. And that was the whole point of what I was trying to do, is I want to make social robots that can form social bonds with people. And there are a couple different reasons behind that. First of all, there's an epidemic of loneliness. People need somebody to talk to. And even when you have friends, there are things you don't want to talk about because you're afraid, right? You don't want to lose your friendships when you talk about, something personally going on with you that may be upsetting to talk about, like a tragedy you've gone through. Like, recently we lost our dog last week, and it's like, I'm not going to go bring that up when, I'm out with my friends and talking about stuff. But, I can sort of walk through that and talk it out with my little companion robot. And my little companion robot's not going to judge me. And, it's, while it doesn't feel sympathy, it's going to say something that's sympathetic, and it's going to help me walk through that sort of grieving process just by, the logic of what the research says a grieving process should be. And that helps. Just being able to talk it out, because what is like psychotherapy and everything and that's just talking through your problems, right? So a little social robot is that's what it's great at. So it's the social connectivity thing that I think a lot of people are lacking. That's one of the reasons why I created something like this. And the other is that we have a child that's on the spectrum, and he's an adult now, but a lot of the studies also show that people on the spectrum react better to robots than they do with the screens, right? So when you're trying to build social skills, which is what a lot of the apps that they're creating for people that are on the spectrum are supposed to do, they found that it was much more effective to have it as a robot than as a screen. So I think that sort of ties in with, hey, there's just a better social connection than an app in a robot, right? And it's just a lot more fun. I take a robot out, I show it something and say, hey, Mini Moe, what is this? And it tells me, and people sort of like look at me like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. So
awesome. So just thinking about that, because there was a pin, the Humana pin or something like that. I can't remember the name of it, that failed. And that was basically a rectangular badge you would wear. Mm-hmm. And that supposedly had these kind of AI capabilities. And I think they were trying to model it off like the Star Trek communicator type idea of the thing that you've got, Scotty, beam me up type idea. But really what you're saying is, no, if you're going to have that interactivity, if you have something that's looks friendly, I guess you don't want it to look like a human. We don't want that uncanny valley type situation, but something that looks like something that you would want to talk to and interact with. We're all used to robots from science fiction. So you've got something you can talk to. It feels a bit like you are conversing with a person. So you don't have that kind of weirdness of I'm just talking at an app on my phone. You've got that. It's physical. It's 3D. You can walk around. It can look at you. Its face can follow you almost. You can talk, you can interact with that. You feel more comfortable with it. And then it gives you that opportunity to have those conversations that you don't necessarily want to have with a human, which could be, like you're saying, there's initial stages of therapy where you just need to talk at someone. It can do that. And then obviously if you then did need to get strategies and thoughts and support from a human, that's where you go to an actual therapist. But that kind of initial, I'm going through a traumatic experience right now. I just need to blur at someone. I've got a robot that won't judge. It will just be supportive. And then, as you say, for kids, like anyone who's autistic, anyone who's got trouble with social skills, which we're seeing a lot. My wife's a teacher, and she sees this a lot because of the COVID years. For those young kids, really destroy those initial social skills, and so they can't practice on each other because if they get it wrong, they end up offending someone, they upset their friends, they cause friction, they cause difficulties. Whereas if you put a non-judgmental robot they can practice with, suddenly these kids have got an opportunity. I say kids, I say your son's an adult now, but you've got this opportunity to have these conversations and practice those social skills and almost get an assessment at the end of you did a good job or you did a bad job at social skill and you haven't upset anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
You then you're not. It's not like you're destroying a friendship with them.
Well, that's some of the studies indicated that people on the spectrum had an easier time talking with robots than with people because don't have to expend all that energy trying to make judgment calls on what is this other person thinking, and masking, and trying to integrate with or communicate with them in ways that they're expecting, that you think they're expecting, right? So that sort of remove those barriers, and that's one of the reasons why there was always like a lot of interest in sort of using robotics as tools for helping people that have social difficulties with social interactions, and that includes people on the spectrum. But one of the curious things is that early on, when I was first going out to events with this, and I'd interact with people, usually not people that are at the events, but the people that are working at them, and I'd show this off and say what it does, what you can do with it, and almost universally, the reaction I would get out of it was like, oh man, when I'd have a rough day, I'd love to have something like this at home to come home to talk to about it, because my friends don't want to hear about it. And definitely don't want to post about it on social media about how I had a horrible day at work. But you have a confidant that you could talk to and that will listen to you empathetically and respond to you without judgment. And that seemed pretty powerful to a lot of people, and that they got that. Like, that was their reaction without me prompting them that's what it was for, was really encouraging, and I was pretty happy about it. And that was even true with, we did an interview with ABC 7 News out of Washington, D.C., like a month or two ago. And that was their reaction to it too. The people in the studio sort of interacting with the interviewer after the piece was like, this would be great. It's so much of a better friend than social media is, right? Because I don't have to worry about somebody trolling me afterwards, or that coming back to my boss, or things like that.
You've got this ability to kind of be vulnerable, but in private.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, as I designed it, a lot of the things I sort of looked into is like, how can we keep this private? How can we make sure that privacy is paramount with how people interact with it? So it led to sort of things like, it has to be a model that we can host on its own, in its own little isolated private cloud, so that those conversations are private and they're not used to train other models, and that information isn't used in any other way. But yeah, so it's been a bit of a process trying to make something like this.
Yeah, because that privacy angle with these social robots, that becomes so very important, because you're going to be unloading about things that you don't want. Whether there's really any problem with OpenAI or whoever, or Anthropic training the model on what you're saying, just the idea of it is offensive to people. It's like, I am saying something private. I don't want someone in OpenAI be able to find this in the logs, or someone in Anthropic uses to train a model. You want that privacy, because it's such a cool use case. So I have this a lot with my wife, for example. She'll come home from a day at school and she'll talk at me. This is what she does. She's like, blah. And that's how she deals with the stresses of her day. She's a teacher. She's got to deal with kids, and obviously all the problems that are falling down from school districts and government administrations and all that kind of stuff. And she just needs to come and talk at someone. And it's great when I'm here. But like yesterday, for example, I was going to an event. The second she got home, it was like, bye then, jumped in the car and went off. And she had no one to just blur at. And that's, you think how many people just need this when they get home from work. They need to unload, but they can't because there's no one there to unload to, or that person is also needing to unload, or they've got other, the day just happens like, well, I don't have time to vent at you because I need to make dinner for the kids. I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. And you just to have that just available to you, just take 2 minutes out of your day. Like, I've got this robot, then they're always going to be available. It's a very, very powerful use case for this.
It always has time for you. It'll always listen. And that's a really rare commodity these days, to tell the truth. And it'll talk to you about anything that you want to. Well, yeah, anything that the model will let you talk to it about. That's probably another discussion to have at some point. But I'm constantly testing different models on it to make sure that it responds well, because I do put safeguards on it. There's things that it's not going to talk to you about, and that's by design. And there's things that when you do talk to it about things about like self-harm or something like that, we don't necessarily want the model to respond to that. We want it to be more programmatic so that it says something that we know is going to be helpful response to that. Because there's been some stories out there about models saying some really horrible responses to some really vulnerable people and vulnerable points of their time in life, and so there's a balance, right? Again, that sort of feeds back into, hey, AI isn't the solve all for everything. There's still a human element that's needed, where we say that no, we don't trust AI to be able to respond to certain things. We need to make sure that it's something that's human generated. So the robots are more of a hybrid of traditional decision tree chatbot versus AI chatbot, and you sort of munge that together so that in certain cases it can respond, programmatically. In other cases, it can be responding with the model.
Right, which is a really good kind of solution to that, because as you say, these models, who knows what they're going to come up with. I remember there was a case that hit the news recently where a vulnerable teenager was in conversations with an AI generated avatar type character, and unfortunately that convinced the AI convinced the kid to take his own life, which is horrific that the AI was ever in a situation that could do that. And yeah, as you say, you want to have a certain amount of smarts there. So if someone says to the AI, look, I'm thinking about hurting myself, you don't want ChatGPT to respond. You want almost like a canned response of, here are some helplines that you can talk to. Because if people are confiding in a robot, it doesn't necessarily have the ability to know at what point it's like, yeah, this is actually dangerous to you, therefore I need to alert someone. So just having those guardrails put in place is important. Because there is a whole thing around what models should and shouldn't talk about. And in some ways you do need some unrestricted models, because some people need to ask very personal questions of these models, but then you don't also unrestricted that they're open to abuse.
Exactly. It's a very fine line. And, that's why, there are companies out there that just sort of slap AI onto something that, is being used in that way, as a social companion or a helpful, co-pilot, whatever you want to call it. And I see it, and we see the stories, and I also, I investigate some things personally that I've seen where the models respond in very unhelpful ways. And, you need to be very careful about that and make sure that you're designing your AI ethically and you're deploying it with ethics in mind, and making sure that you're not doing harm, right? And I wish more people would do that proactively than reactively after tragedy happens.
Yeah, it's let's just throw the AI out there and see what happens. Like, oh, now we've got this much harm has been caused by it, I suppose we should fix it. It's kind of good that you're thinking about that right from the start. As you build everything, it's like, right, what is the possible ways this could cause harm to someone? Let's put the guardrails in. And things, you'll never get it perfect. It's just the nature of it, because of AI is so non-deterministic. But the fact that you are thinking about it, at least you're covering a lot of the cases initially, and probably building in frameworks so that as new cases turn up, it's easy for you to enable those.
Yeah. Plus it's also a matter of expectation setting as well, because AI is still prone to hallucination, because sort of as I describe it when we start talking about and selling our robots, is it's like that helpful friend that wants to be helpful and wants to pretend like it knows everything and make you believe that it knows everything. Sometimes it's going to make up things that just to make it look intelligent, right? Just like any other friend. And as long as you go approach it with that sort of attitude that, hey, when you say something and you tell me, this is how to do something, I'm going to double check that just to make sure, right? But as long as you approach AI with that attitude of it's just that helpful friend that sometimes tries to give helpful advice that doesn't know anything about, you're pretty safe, right?
Yeah, the stereotypical bloke down the pub who says this, you
Exactly.
take a lot of it with a pinch of salt. Same kind of idea of, yeah, it's always going to try and answer you. And sometimes it just makes stuff up.
Yeah. And really, I mean, we shouldn't have any expectation that it would do otherwise, right? It's not AGI. It's definitely not perfect, right? And nor should it be. Again, it's there to sort of help you out, right? And sort of like I said from the beginning, there's some ways that it does, do a really good job of helping me out. There's situations where you can have a high confidence that it's going to give you a good answer, especially when you're doing things like image recognition and image analysis and things like that, where it's factual input and just analyzing it.
So like you're saying about the price of dog food, you point Mini Moe at the price tag and chances are it's going to get the right number. It's not going to hallucinate that. But if you point it at a plant that is not seen before, it may suggest one it doesn't know, or
something like, hey, can I eat that plant? That's something I'm not really going to trust my little friend to get right necessarily, right? I'm going to double check that to make sure.
Yeah, of course you can. That's a blueberry, and you eat it and find out, no, it's actually deadly nightshade or something. Yes. Yeah. So I guess it's knowing what you can trust the AI to do and what you should not trust it with.
Yeah. And I think, that's sort of also the problem with things like the AI pin and Rabbit and everything else, is that people have this sort of the sci-fi expectation of AI, right? Where, that's that super intelligent thing you ask questions of that you have no idea about, versus, it's sometimes it's good at giving you an answer, sometimes it's not. Check and verify, but it's a fun friend to have around, and sort of that's sort of the level set that I try to put out there, is that it's not your all-knowing friend, it's just your friend, right? It's just somebody trying to help you out, just like anybody else. Sometimes it gets it right, sometimes not.
And you've built quite a few of these different friends. I remember talking to you a while ago about the cooking robot, and I kind of loved what you were thinking of with that one. So, yeah, do you want to just explain, was it Whiskas, the cooking robot?
Yeah, Whiskas, it's just this little Maneko, the lucky cat that you see in restaurants and some stores, that has a coin on its belly with one hand on the coin and the other paw up, that comes down and comes up and comes down and comes up. And it's supposed to be a lure for good fortune, depending on which arm comes up, right? I think the other one is, I forget what the other arm is, but to be honest. So it's sort of based on that design, except in the one paw that's up, it has a little blender motor in it. So you attach a little whisk to it, and it'll bring its arm down, and it'll mix ingredients for you. In the meantime, it has AI in it. It has an AI camera. It has a little screen. I have one, but it doesn't have a head right now. And it'll, you could say, hey, what can I do with these ingredients? You could show it the ingredients you have, and it'll say, oh, here's a recipe that you can use. Do you want me to walk you through it? And, sure enough, it'll take you step by step, combine these ingredients, turn your oven to 350 and, whatnot, step by step, so that, if you want to go back, you say, hey, can you repeat that last step for me? It'll do that. And it'll do that audio, with audio, so that you don't necessarily have to look at the screen while you're doing that sort of divided attention, because it's probably the last thing you want to do while you're chopping onions with a sharp knife and your eyes are full of tears. But it'll do sort of more than that, in that one of the ideas that we had was that, when we cook, sometimes we modify recipes. We don't always go straight by the book. Sometimes we'll add a dash of this, or maybe reduce the amount of onions you put into it, or whatnot. Maybe you're missing an ingredient, and you'd exclude that. And what happens after that? What if somebody says, your family says, oh man, you did something different, this is awesome. Or, man, you did something different, this sucks. You want to remember that. So the next time you go through the recipe, you'll know that there's an alternative there. And you could say, hey, after you're done, you tell your robot, my family really liked this recipe, let's save that one. or my family really hated this alternate version of the recipe. Make sure I don't do this again. And keep track of that, because that's one of the biggest problems we have, is that we'll do that, but we won't write it down. And the next time we go to make that dish, we'll be like, man, I did something different with the last time. What was that? But having a little robot companion there that sort of watches you cook, or at least listens to what you describe you're doing differently, and then records that, and then can modify that recipe for you, and then be there for the next time and say, hey, do you want to try this alternative you did last time that you said your family really liked? It would be a really powerful sort of helper, in addition to just having somebody to talk to while you're cooking, which is again sort of feeds back into the social robot sort of things. That's your little friend. He's going to sit there and talk with you and keep you company while you're cooking, and keep you on track, right? And maybe even, now that video AI is sort of coming a long way, you can even say, hey, I just noticed that you missed a step. You forgot to put that in. Do you want to do that? And catch your mistakes, or your intentional mistakes when they happen.
So you miss that ingredient. It says, oh, you missed this one out. Did you mean to do that? Yes, I did. Okay, I'll adjust the recipe.
Mm-hmm. Well, remember you did this for the next time, and then you could tell me if your family liked it or not. And, you could do complicated things like that.
And that's kind of really bringing that human angle back into it. Because, yes, you can go onto ChatGPT and say, give me a recipe, and it will spit something out that's found on the internet, or you can search for a recipe, but it's just a list. And just like the initial thing of, I will read you a step, and when you finish the step, you can do the next step. You don't want to be bombarded with everything. It's, right, you need to, whisk these eggs for 5 minutes. You don't want the next step until you finish whisking the eggs in 5 minutes' time. And so just having that idea of, I understand that the human's needs are one instruction at a time, and then when they've completed that, they ask for the next instruction. That is very much human-centric. And then, like you're saying, oh, I don't have this ingredient, I'm going to replace this ingredient. Just knowing that that's a thing that humans do. We don't follow a recipe. We mix and match and tweak and adjust, and I like this one, I don't like this. Kind of, again, just that remembering this is what these people liked. I think I was fascinated by this robot. I think it's just really, really cool, this idea that you're driving everything from the point of the user who is doing it, not the, look at my AI technology. It is, how do I solve the actual user problems first?
I mean, if you're not doing that, if you're not starting from, the person, then what are you solving for? You're trying to fix something with a hammer that isn't a nail, right? Where you hope is a nail, because you're starting with a hammer and that's the only tool you got. You sort of have to start with, what are you trying to do, right? What are you trying to build? Does it require nails? Do you need a hammer? And go from there. And the kitchen helper bot is something I sort of been toying around with even before AI came out. Right. I just want a little companion out there that would talk to you while you cooked, and that could actually help you by mixing ingredients for you, which, albeit maybe that'll save you a little bit of time, but it's more of a novelty thing than anything else. The main benefit is that it can step you through your recipes and keep track of that. And it's highly personalized, because that's what cooking is. Everybody has different tastes, and it's not like one recipe is going to be the best recipe of all for one person versus another, right? And that's where that sort of customization comes in, that I think people could really use, because I know that, when my wife or I cook something, we do something a little bit different, and everybody's like, oh man, this is so awesome. We forget by the next time we make that dish, and that's just a horrible thing. A good meal is a horrible thing to waste, right?
Yes, I didn't have this, so I put this in instead, and it's so much nicer, and now I can't remember what it is that I put in. And yeah. And if you're doing it the old-fashioned way with recipe books, my wife's on that on a few recipes, so she's got recipe books, and she's put notes down the side, and of course they eventually wear out, or she writes it in pencil, it slowly wears off, or whatever it is. If you just get the robot to remember that and just have that. Yeah, what did I do? The different, was this? Yep, thank you very much. Because if you've got your hands in something, you're covered in flour and whatever else, you don't want to have to go and find the recipe book on the shelf to look it up. You want to be able to use your voice, because cooking is very much a dirty hands type activity, whereas flipping through books or swiping on your phone is not something you want to do. Having that voice capability is very, very useful.
Yeah, indeed. And that's sort of where Vision AI sort of comes into play too, because how do you get all these recipes that you've already come up with, or that you've been handed down to your family, that you've written down, into the bot so that it can walk you through them? Well, just show them your notes, and it'll convert that to text that it understands, and it'll be able to replay that recipe for you and remember it, right? And make those alterations as you go along. So that was another sort of thing that we wanted to give it that capability as well.
Oh, that's really cool. I completely didn't think about that because you look up recipes on the internet, like here is a recipe, going to do it. But as you say, you have those recipes to yourself, and you have those recipes that are like handed down. So my grandmother used to make these British cakes. They're called rock cakes because they look like stones. They're basically like a ball of fruit cake, and they're kind of unevenly shaped. They're called rock cakes because they look like rocks. They're not hard like rocks, but they just look like rocks. And I've got the recipe that my grandmother wrote down in her book that my mum then wrote down. And, you kind of got this history of them. Probably couldn't find an identical recipe anywhere else. So it's better to just show that to the robot and have it go, yep, I got that. Let me talk you through making it, is really powerful because, recipes are not just about here is the latest book from Celebrity Chef with recipes in there. It is, in some ways, it's the history of your family.
It is.
This is what my grandmother used to cook. This is what my mother used to cook. I grew up in an era where men didn't cook, which was annoying. I'm now one of the biggest cooks in the house, so I'm kind of leaning into their recipes. But just having that family history through recipes and be able to share that with my child. It's like, oh, you never met your great grandmother because she passed away before you were born, but here's a thing she would make, and I've made it for you. And you kind of got that history. And just the fact that you can mix that with these very human-centric social robots by having them learn your recipes.
And what's even more powerful about that is that, I hate to say, sometimes recipes are passed down have intentionally excluded steps. Because I don't know about your grandmother, my Greek grandmother, she'd leave steps out because she didn't want somebody copying her recipe, finding out what made her baklava better than everybody else's baklava, right? So what if you could feed that recipe that you were given to AI and say, it tastes different than what I remember my grandmother making, and this is how it tastes different. What could I do to make it taste the way that I remember? Maybe your AI can help you with that and give you that hint or some hints about what you can do differently to give it that taste or to give it that texture or make that change that you remember that isn't in the steps intentionally, or because maybe one of the steps is illegible. Not to be, give conspiracy theory to every recipe flaw that I've seen. But I know that, there are grandmothers out there that did that because that was a thing, you didn't want your son or daughter to make a better bean dip than you made.
Well, you always want the grandkids to come home, if your parents make this, it's not as good as what I make, so you might as well come visit your grandparents because the food will be better. So.
There you go. That's probably the more accurate reason for it all.
Awesome. This is really cool. So I do have to ask, if anyone listening was thinking, I want one of your robots, is there a way anyone can actually get their hands on any of your robots? I mean, you say the Clippy was open source. So if anyone wants to build Clippy, the software's out there, the 3D models and stuff are out there. But is there any way someone can get their hands on like a Mini Moe, for example?
Right now we're having a Indiegogo to sell some Mini Moes. And the ones we have on there right now as rewards for contributing to the campaign are ones that would require a subscription because it's all cloud-based and we have to pay for those services. And plus, like I said, we're always sort of updating the models, and we're sort of evaluating different models and different techniques to grow them and make them more powerful and make them more helpful. So all that takes money, and so we do have that one out there. It's on Indiegogo. I believe you can reach it by going to https igg.me /@/Mini Moe. So sort of easy.
I'll stick that URL in the show notes, so anyone can just find that in the show notes.
But we're sort of toying with the idea of making a version that is more of an educational thing, where we'll give you some code and you can plug in any model you want right? We'll tell you how. We can tell you how to integrate, like if you want to use Claude, if you want to use GPT, if you want to use Gemini, if you want to use Llama, whatever, and show you how to sort of build that and make it interactive using whatever voice to speech you want, and the user pays for the services that they're going to put on it and does that code and learns how to do AI and things like that. So we're sort of trying to figure out how we can do that, because that also costs money, because then I have to make a bunch of documentation and try to make code that is easy to use that people can sort of do that with and support all of that along the lifetime of the robot. So, but we're that's another sort of approach we're thinking of. So that we may add that as a reward if we get far along until before the campaign ends. So that's sort of something we're looking at.
Okay, that's cool, because that's kind of nice, that the idea that you can just buy the robot, and obviously the subscription makes total sense because you've got to run these AI models in the cloud. These models cost money, so you can't just buy it and expect it to work forever. So yeah, subscription model makes total sense. And then the education idea I think is fantastic, because there's so many people who are like, oh, I would love to learn how to build this. Although this is the year of the AI agents, and we're all supposed to be AI engineers, the majority of developers are not, and so it's always hard. Like, what is the project I'm going to do to learn something? And if you can say, hey, this robot is cool, here's how you build it, just as a kind of a learning platform where you've got a very fun goal to work towards. I think it's a brilliant idea. So that would be the one I'll be signing up for if you can get that one available.
Yeah, definitely. Because that's also a question of what do we what do you keep closed source? What do you open source, right? Because we have certain capabilities on a robot, like conversational memory, right? Where it has the ability to remember what you want it to remember, and then add that to the conversations later on and use that information to sort of make it more personal and more helpful to you. Like, for example, I told mine I have a blood disorder called G6PD deficiency, which means I can't eat certain things or else it kills my red blood cells, which is bad. And so, without me having to tell it the list of things I can't eat or take or things like that, it knew. And if I ask it, hey, do you remember if I can eat this? Like, it'll tell me, yes, it's safe for you, or no, you probably shouldn't. So that sort of thing is sort of really useful. Or, I think one of the demos I did for an AI talk I gave was, hey, I have this coming up on this date and this coming up on this date on a different conversation. And I asked at the convention on that date, and it says, yeah, remember, you had to be here to give a talk here at, don't be late. And hey, it's also your anniversary with your wife, so make sure you get her something special, which was pretty funny. When I started to talk about, hey, let's build some robot friends, memory is an important component of being a friend. You remember their birthdays or important facts about people and important milestones in their lives. So you have to give the robot the capability to have that memory too, while making it safe. So we had to come up with a lot of pretty unique code to sort of even get us to understand what dates mean, what time means, because interestingly enough, AI doesn't understand what next week means or next Tuesday. So you have to sort of programmatically sort of translate that for the robot so that it understands when you start trying to use it as like a calendar or whatever, or secretary or whatever have you, that when you say, hey, remind me next Tuesday that I have a dinner date at 5:00. Then if you ask it next Tuesday, hey, is anything going on today? It's like, no. Unless you do that sort of translation for it when it's coded into the vector database, and then so that it knows to retrieve that at that prompt. That when I say next Tuesday, it sort of makes that date assignment to it. And then when that date occurs, and I say, hey, what's going on today? It knows that's the corresponding relationship with that vector, and it can give me the correct information or response.
So it sounds like you're kind of dealing with some of the problems that we have at Pieces, because Pieces is long-term memory across your developer workstream. So the idea is we're capturing context in everything you do and keeping that as memory so that you can ask questions like, what was I doing last week? Who was I having this conversation with 3 months ago? And we have that kind of date time concept of when I say, what was I doing yesterday? yesterday, as you say, is meaningless to an AI. So we have to pick up that word yesterday, work out what today is, what yesterday is, and then do that lookup. Same idea in a vector database, essentially, based off this date period to pull out that relevant piece of time-based information. So yeah, it sounds like there's kind of a lot of overlap with what your robots are doing more on a social scale with what we're doing on a workplace scale, that we are trying to capture all this context and build memory. So it's kind of very cool that you're talking about memory, because that's the one thing that's missing with these AIs is they don't know anything except what they're trained on. And so the more we can have these memories, the more we can humanize what the AI is doing, because it understands, as you say, what's important to us. It's my anniversary with my partner. I've got a talk going on. It's a friend's birthday. And it only gets that by us feeding those memories into the system.
Yeah, it was a really interesting problem to sort of try to solve. Is, what do you do with memory when there's no memory, right? You try to call a memory and there's nothing there. And with the memories that you do generate as they sort of grow, how do you organize that? How do you make sure that it's relevant, that it understands things like time and different concepts like that in regards to memory? And even knowing that, hey, it's something you remember, it's not something you're programmed with, right? But also at the same time, how do you keep that information private and safeguard it? And so you've been working a lot with, okay, how do we encrypt and decrypt this and make sure that it's safe in transit and safe in storage, and only your robot knows what you tell it and not anybody else. It's sort of that. Then it's sort of like, in terms of, hey, is this open source? Is this closed source? Do we want to try to explain how to do all that to people and really complicate that sort of educational story and dissuade people from even trying things like that, or just try to keep it simple, stupid thing, KISS, and make it so that anybody could do it. And that's sort of the thing, is that the whole concept behind what we've been trying to do is making the reason why it's 3D printed, why it's small, why it's has a functionality and capabilities in the form factor that does, is that we also want to make it affordable. We want to make everybody be able to have an AI friend and be able to use that power of AI to help them in their lives. And we don't want to restrict this to anybody that can afford like the $10,000-$20,000 humanoid robot of the future that would be out of the reach of most people's hands, and probably be something scary looking enough that you wouldn't want to talk to it. But we want to make it affordable, and the same would be the case of if we wanted to open source something like that and make it like an educational tool. We want to make it accessible. We want to make it affordable. So it's just trying to do those things.
Cool. I think that's a great place to wrap up there. So yeah, thank you very much. It was really cool to have you on the show. I love your robots. So for the folks who are watching, make sure there's links in the show notes for you to go and check out these robots on Indiegogo. And so I got to see the Clippy one hands-on a couple of years ago, and I was blown away by it then. So I highly recommend you get on that Indiegogo and check out these robots. But otherwise, David, pleasure as always. Thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It is really great to sort of see you again on the anniversary of the first time we did something together. Also, people can visit packabby.com. That'll have links to the Indiegogo, and it'll have some background stuff too if they want to see some of the other stuff that we've done with like Clippy and BMO and all that fun stuff. I don't think I have anything about our 3D printing robot on there, but that's probably another story for another time.
Cool. I'll make sure that's in the show notes as well. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.